All right, then. I figured this day would come. I figured that we'd be having this conversation at some point. And I think it might be a little bit of an awkward one. It's important for me to say from the very beginning here that I'm going to talk about Bruno Fernandes and the links with Saudi Arabia, right? And I, as a Manchester United fan, absolutely do not want this to happen. I love Bruno Fernandes. He is firmly probably in the top 3 players that I would just absolutely not want to be sold by Manchester United. I don't want it considered at all. But the more and I felt this for a while, the more I think about it, the more I deep it, the more I look at the problems that United have, the more I look at the service that Bruno Fernandes has given to Manchester United. I think there are some reasons why it's not just as cut and dry as saying no. And I want to talk about that on the Promised Land podcast today. I'm Scott Saunders, host of the Promised Land podcast, and you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow me on social media at @_Scott Saunders as well, and let me know your thoughts. Also, give a 5-star review to the podcast if you would like to do so, and leave a comment as well. This one is especially a big talking point, I think, because I think the split is generally about 90-10 in terms of wanting to keep Bruno Fernandes. And like I say, I'm very much in that camp of I want him to stay. I think he's one of the best players in the world. I think I can't question his love for Manchester United. I think he represents the club incredibly well as captain. But we know the situation that United are in, and I think there are a couple of things that United really could and should consider before this deal is called off or whatever it is. Now, it's important to know that we're at the very early stages of this, and there are reports coming out of Saudi Arabia which came out on Monday in the afternoon. It just so happens that I record a podcast, and then right after that's released, this comes up, and all the talk is about this for the next 24 hours, and I'm 24 hours late to it or whatever it is. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. I considered making a podcast a little bit earlier than this, but I thought let's see how the land lies, and let's reflect a little bit on my perspective on this, and maybe I'll come to you with an episode on Tuesday, which is it's Tuesday afternoon at the moment as I record this. So get in touch with me on social media. Let me know what you think of this. And I think maybe not everything that I'm going to say in this is super popular, especially because I know there's some people who do listen to this and do like the podcast. I've already seen your positions on this, and I do understand that. And I would say that my position on this and any sale of Bruno Fernandes is it potentially spells disaster for Manchester United, and it is firmly he is the crown jewel. I've spoken about Kobbie Mainoo being the crown jewel from an academy perspective, but Bruno Fernandes is the player that makes Manchester United tick. He is the one that bails Manchester United out. And you dread to think where United would be without him. And that is absolutely a fair conversation and a fair point to make. But I think the one thing for me here, and I think my guiding point on all of this, and whether, as I record this, I don't know the position. And I don't know where everybody stands, right? Apart from Manchester United, who've come out and essentially said he's not for sale. And that's cool. I'll get into that in a little bit. But for me, knowing the service that Bruno Fernandes has given Manchester United over the course of 5 years, knowing the numbers, knowing the trophies that he's won, knowing the way he represents the football club, knowing the kind of guy that he is, I personally think, and this is the crux of the situation for me, what does Bruno Fernandes want? Because we've seen plenty of examples in the past of United, not just United, other clubs keeping players at the club, perhaps against their will, because they are simply too valuable to them to let go, right? And I think Bruno Fernandes is probably in that situation. He is that important to Manchester United. But what does he want? Last summer, Bruno Fernandes signed a contract extension until 2027 with the option for a further year. He was established. He's been established as the captain for a good few years. He was talking about the plan that Manchester United have. At the time of that plan, the manager was different. And Bruno Fernandes has led Manchester United this season. He's one of Europe's premium creators. The numbers are incredible. Goals and assists are incredible. His influence on Manchester United is incredible. But I don't think you can sit there and say that Manchester United this season haven't failed Bruno Fernandes. And given the service that Bruno Fernandes has put in and given to Manchester United, I think he has earned the right personally to decide and inform Manchester United of what he wants to do. If he has an offer on the table, and whatever you say about players, whether they take the money in Saudi Arabia, what their motivators are, there is, the other side of this, that the money is off the scale. It's kind of unlike any money that any player could ever make in their life, really. So very few players have the opportunity to make as much money as Bruno Fernandes would potentially make out of a situation like this. What is his motivator at the moment? Because last year, his motivator was to bring Manchester United back, to see them through the rebuild phase, to bring them back and to win trophies with them, right? And then 9 games into the season, the same team that convinced him to sign the new contract sacked the manager that he was working with when he signed the contract. Now, I, on this podcast, have said numerous times, I think United are in probably their lowest ebb, and I think they will improve, right? I think what we're seeing now is the worst version of United, and I think it can only go uphill from here. I don't see how it gets any worse, but then I said that last season as well. But have United really lived up to their end of the bargain with Bruno Fernandes? And there's a completely valid argument to say that Bruno Fernandes, and I think this is the most important thing to say in this entire thing, right? What does the player want? Because if he wants to go and United are saying he's not for sale, is that a situation that you want to be in as a football club when you're trying to build a culture, when you're trying to, and I'm not saying that Bruno Fernandes was down tools and he would drop his, he would pack up and go on strike or whatever in order to force this move through. And that's not what I'm saying at all. But he's at the stage of his life and his career where he's probably got he's got a big contract left in him. I don't see a Real Madrid, a Barcelona, a super massive club going and paying the kind of money that it would take to get Bruno Fernandes out of Manchester United at the moment. I just don't see it, because that is, A, Barcelona can't afford it, B, Real Madrid just don't do it, and how many other options are there for him? There's not many clubs out there who can put up the kind of money that would convince United to sell, right? So what options is he left with? He can stick to what he initially decided and help United come back and get back to relevance, or there's a potential contract on the table for him which would potentially change his life forever. And that's a separate conversation to have. I'm not here to judge anyone's motives or whatever. But United say that he's not for sale, but I think you have to recognize the situation. And I think the most important thing here is what Bruno Fernandes wants to do. And as it stands, as I record this, we don't know what that is at the moment. But we know that he considered and he had offers last year. He decided against it, but United, as I record this, find themselves 15th in the league. And I'm sure at the start of the season, Bruno Fernandes did not think that Manchester United would be 15th in the league, despite every single amazing effort, every single goal, every single assist, every single key pass he put in. After everything he delivered, he finds United in 15th. And United's entire season hinges on whether they can win the Europa League. You dread to think what will come of this if they don't. And look, I like I say, I'm going to repeat myself here. Sorry if I am going over myself, but I wouldn't sell and I don't want to. That is my situation. But I think his most important thing here is considering what the player wants himself. The interest from Saudi Arabia has been talked about. whether it's legitimate or not. I don't really think you can debate whether it's legitimate or not, because I think it pretty much is. I think that, especially, you saw how hard Saudi Arabia went after Mohamed Salah last summer or the summer before that. £150 million offer to Liverpool, which was rejected. Mohamed Salah has ended up signing a couple of Liverpool contracts since, right? And he's still there. But that and the fact that they brought in Cristiano Ronaldo at the very beginning, you can't really doubt the intention and the money that clubs in Saudi Arabia will throw at situations like this for players as high reputation as the likes of Bruno Fernandes. There are not many players with as high a reputation as Bruno Fernandes at the moment that Saudi Arabia and their clubs could make as big a statement with. And I think the interest is there. I think it's legitimate. There's suggestions from Saudi Arabian press that meetings has happened with his representatives, and where we land at the moment, I don't know. I don't know whether we'll get any real revelation of what Bruno Fernandes wants to do while the season is being played. But the fact that there has been a meeting, which you can dispute, you can potentially not, a meeting with his representatives to talk about things, indicates that there are conversations happening and the interest is legitimate. And I think other sources have confirmed that they have wanted Bruno Fernandes in this league for a long time. And there's no reason to think why it will go away at the moment. So I think if there are reports suggesting that they want him, I think it's fair to say that they probably do want him, right? So Manchester United's response to this: no sale. We don't want it to happen. That's the correct position. From United side, I think that's completely the correct position. Ruben Amorim has said himself in a press conference recently, I'm sure he will be asked about this in the coming days as well. No, I don't want to sell him. No chance. I've told him he's not going anywhere. I don't want it to happen. And of course, he would obviously say that. I think he's been asked about other players as well, and the answer's been different. We'll see what happens in the summer. But I think with Bruno Fernandes, his foot's been down, and it's been, we want to keep him. He's not going anywhere. But we all know, and I've said on this podcast numerous times, we all know that there is a possibility this summer of an unpopular sale. And noise has kind of cooled a little bit since lots of cuts have been made at United, and they think that they will be able to, do what they want to do in the summer, regardless of whether they get in the Champions League or not. But we know the difference that being in the Champions League will make to the pockets and to their ability to spend money. There is obviously that possibility as I record this that United don't get into the Champions League, don't have as many as 15 to 20 other matches to play in Europe, and they don't have as much revenue coming in. So I really do think that I've personally always expected that there could be an unpopular sale in the wings. We've been talking about Garnacho and Kobbie Mainoo, and as it stands and as it's looked over the course of the last few months, I think Garnacho is probably that player that I've thought of most in reference to that than anybody else. But I think Manchester United's most prized asset in terms of how much money they would cost, in terms of the salary they make, is Bruno Fernandes. And there are other higher earners higher than him, but I think Bruno Fernandes was given by Ineos this massive contract as they look to reset their wage structure and prioritize. Bruno Fernandes is the leader of the team. He's the captain. He's the player that delivers the most. Therefore, he has deserved the highest wages. And I think other players like Marcus Rashford and Casemiro, who are around him in the earnings, around £300,000 a week, we know that United don't see those players as players that will continue with the team beyond next year, really. So I think it's definitely smart as a supporter, and look, it's important for me to say this as well, that I'm coming at this from the perspective of what I try and do in my podcast as a supporter, but also somebody who has worked in football for a decade plus, and I do try and keep an element of objectivity with this. I do try and maybe take a little bit of a an alternative turn on things rather than just coming straight down the lens from the fan perspective and trying to look at the situation and looking at United's problems that they have in order to this podcast is called The Promised Land, for example. It's tracking how Manchester United get back to winning the Champions League and back to winning Premier Leagues, where Clive Tilsley said Manchester United have reached the promised land when they won the European Champions League in 1999 after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer scored. That's where the name comes from. That is the whole reason for this podcast. It's how do Manchester United get back to the top? Turns out that they're at their absolute lowest ebb ever, and they have just been slowly trading downwards and downwards and downwards ever since this podcast has started. But look, I think as I record this, I'm recording this before the Athletic game in the Europa League, the second leg. United have a 3-0 advantage. United have to win the Europa League. They simply have to. And if they don't, that previously talked about unpopular sale could really, really hone in and come way more into focus. Obviously, the talk is that Al Hilal wants Bruno Fernandes in for the first game in the Club World Cup, which United aren't playing in. I think they play Real Madrid on the 18th-ish of June or something around that date, 14th of June. And they want Bruno Fernandes in that team. But he has a certain amount of time to decide. I don't think there will be any real kind of pickup on this, and maybe there will be, I don't know. But it really, what Bruno Fernandes gets out of Manchester United next season is really dependent on the Europa League. If he lifts the Europa League in Bilbao on the 21st of May, then he will play in the Champions League next season. He has to ask himself the question of what he wants. Because if he's not playing in the Champions League next year and he's playing in a team which doesn't even have European football at all, what's the motivator here? Does he believe that with a year out of the Champions League that he can, over the course of the contract that he has with Manchester United, get Manchester United back to winning trophies? Maybe he has to ask himself that. And what is the motivator that he has in order to stay at the club? Because if there's an offer like that on the table, after rejecting it a year before and turning offers down, what does he decide to do next? Now, let's talk about the money in a little bit more depth, because we know that Saudi Arabia and their clubs have wanted to make statements around the players that they attract to that league for a long time. And the most famous one outside of Cristiano Ronaldo probably is how they went after Mohamed Salah. And there was a £150 million offer on the table, which Liverpool rejected, and Mo Salah ended up staying. I've already mentioned this, but, I think that the fact that hasn't actually been spent probably proves that the money's still there and they want to make the kind of statement that they wanted to make with Mo Salah signing. So Bruno Fernandes' status is incredible. It's massive. He's United's captain, and he does command, given the contract status that he's in, is up in 2027. His market value, probably not for anybody else, but clubs in Saudi Arabia, is north of £100 million for me. And I don't think Manchester United, their status is not for sale, obviously, but I don't think any bid underneath 100 million quid should even be considered at all. You have to, but if you get to the point where there is ridiculous money on the table, I'm thinking probably along the lines of Premier League record sale for 115 million quid or whatever it is, or maybe it was Coutinho actually from Liverpool. If you're getting in that ballpark, then I think talks change. I really do think talks change, and you have to really consider what that kind of money can do for a club like Manchester United, who are crying out for money, because Bruno Fernandes is so important and crucial to Manchester United, but there is also a conversation to be had around how valuable and how important the money that would come with his sale could be to Manchester United getting back to the top of the league. United's numbers currently come through Bruno Fernandes, and that is amazingly impressive, but is it the healthiest thing for a football team where you have one player who's so absolutely important to your team? There's an argument to say that there isn't. the important thing here to say, obviously, is that we know how United have spent money in the past. And I think people do look at how United have spent money in the past, even going back to like last summer in some cases. But United's habit of spending money has been erroneous. The players that they've signed have been flops. They haven't really had a real tactical identity or a plan, and in terms of the players that they sign, like what they're trying to achieve with those players. And most of the players that United have signed, ironically, with Bruno Fernandes as the outlier here, pretty much every player that they've signed for substantial money has proven to be a failed investment. Bruno Fernandes is the outlier. He is the one player that stands out as the roaring success of Manchester United's recruitment incomings over the past few years. But if there is an offer on the table worth north of 100 million, 110, 115 million pounds, 120 million pounds, that United could go out and get three players, potentially two top level players with that could bring the team forward and improve the team and the way that the team plays. If they could bring that forward with the players that they bring in, you could argue that if that money is used effectively and well, there is merit in this. And the important thing to consider here, that I think maybe people do forget because United have had such a bad season, is that there are different people in charge of recruitment. Christopher Vivell is in charge of recruitment. They were linked with Luis Campos the other day from PSG, which were pretty much poo-pooed straight away. Jason Wilcox is in there. And Christopher Vivell, especially, he's been there for a few months, but he was in a temporary role, has now ascended to like head of recruitment level at Manchester United, and he has a reputation of finding players for very little money who can come in at the other clubs that he's worked for. I've talked about it in another video, especially with his history with Leipzig and the Red Bull clubs. He finds players from different parts of the world who come in, play really well in the league that they're playing in, and get flipped on for massive profit. His MO probably at this point with Manchester United is to do that a little bit with less costly signings, but also find players for less money that can come in and really raise the physical level of this United team. Because if there's the main problem that this Manchester United team has at the moment is their physicality. Ruben Amorim has said it over and over and over again. It's the reason in his eyes, and probably my eyes as well, why Manchester United in the Premier League are absolutely rubbish and why Manchester United in the Europa League are currently, as I record this, unbeaten and looking in a good nick to potentially go to the final. The physicality is different. In the Premier League, you have pretty much every team recruits on how good can they hang in the Premier League, how strong are they, how quick are they, how physically able are they to win one-on-ones or 1v1s. United don't have many players who are good at that. And Bruno Fernandes is ironically one of probably the best players in that conversation. But you look across the team at the moment and you think of how many players United need to bring in order to make this rebuild worthwhile, in order to get or have a group of players who are able to physically outmatch their opponents. You think of the likes of Brentford, they schooled them physically. Bournemouth typically school United physically. There are other teams in the league that typically school United physically, and it usually shows up in the result as well. So I think as much as we know that United need signings, they need to be of the right physical profile in order to be able to come in and make a difference in the Premier League. And when I say physical profile, I'm not talking about one player or two players. That's a multitude of players. You need the physical level to be raised across the pitch generally. So that means you probably need a fair few players in order to raise level. Primarily here, United need players who are more physically able to compete in Premier League football. And I think I think United need 5-6 players potentially to come in and raise the level here. And how easy is that to do at the moment? There's generally the prospect of United not getting into the Champions League by winning the Europa League. They have a final potentially that they're going to go to that they may not win. We don't know at the moment. And I think that final is probably going to be super important for how much money United make, for what players decide on their futures, for earnings of the players that they have, and for having belief in that this Man United progression and change in team and change in personnel and renovation of the first team, how quickly can that happen? It's certainly not going to be that quick if United don't get into the Champions League next season. They're going to have to do things on more of a shoestring. You might see some players leaving when you didn't necessarily expect them to. There's also the system as well. I need to talk about that. And Bruno Fernandes has been playing as a number 10 and the number 6 or number 8 at the moment in Ruben Amorim's iteration of Manchester United. But I don't think there are many players in this United team at the moment that have a bona fide position in Ruben Amorim's 11 that they fit this role, whether that's right centre back who needs to charge forward or central. We're out of the central midfielders. We're not seeing what Ruben Amorim wants to see out of his central midfielders at the moment. We're not seeing the perfect wing backs in the United team at the moment. We're not seeing a striker who can be the battering ram and score loads of goals. We're not seeing the fact that United are trying to sign Mateus Cunha as their first priority from Wolves in the left 10, where Bruno Fernandes has been playing, doesn't scream out to me that there is a natural fixed position for Bruno Fernandes. He's kind of, really, you want two Bruno Fernandeses in the left 10 and the number 6. And maybe he does end up in the number 6, number 8 role. But there are not many players for me at the moment that I see as absolute bona fide fixes in certain positions. And I don't think you can really say that about Bruno Fernandes at the moment either, because we just don't know, even though his numbers are incredible and he's an incredible footballer and he's United's captain and he's super important to the team. Look, I think I've been talking for a little while here and I'm just going to circle back to the beginning, right? I'm coming at this and I'm looking at this situation as a supporter and as just somebody. I try and be as objective as I can. I do pride myself on that happening. And I'm not saying for any reason that I want this to happen, because I don't. And simply put, I think United will have a very, very, very difficult decision to make if they get an offer of £120 million for this transfer to happen. And that is essentially the mindset that I've been coming into here. I don't think it is as simple as just saying no in this situation, despite how much I look at Bruno Fernandes and I think he is fantastic, amazing. And I know the value that he has to this team, but there could be the money that will come with this sale could be as valuable as anything Bruno Fernandes could do on the pitch in the next 5 years. You just don't know. The default thought at the moment is to think that, I won't spend that money very well because they haven't spent that money very well in the past. But we are looking at a different recruitment team, a different coach who knows the ideals that he wants out of all the players that play in his team. And we're in a different era where United potentially could turn a corner with the different people they have in charge of recruitment to make the proper replacements and spend the money that they would get out of this hypothetical transfer wisely. And one final comment that I've forgotten about so far during this podcast that I need to make before I go as well. Those 3 letters, PSR, that you're absolutely sick of. The reason why Man United would sell homegrown players first to make a difference to PSR because they have no book value. That also applies to players that they've spent lots of money on, that they've already amortized over the course of their contracts as well. So I've not wanted to come at it. It seems like as I wrap this episode up that I'm being pro this sale. No, the first priority here is, what does Bruno Fernandes want to do? If he decides that the potential best route for him is to leave, then we look at this and then we consider this and then we look at how much money is actually on the table. Because if a bid of around 120 million quid or however much it is comes in, that is pure profit, or mostly pure profit, because United have had 5 years or so to pay off what Bruno Fernandes' transfer fee was in amortization terms. So it would make an absolutely massive, massive difference to the long-term future of the football club. Anyway, this has been the Promised Land podcast with me, Scott Saunders. Please get in touch with your comments. I would love to hear from you guys in the YouTube comments and on Spotify as well. Get in the comments there, and on Apple Podcasts if you can do that as well. Please subscribe to the channel if you've not done so already. I hope this has come across like I intended it to, in the sense of just trying to look at things from a holistic perspective and not going just down the lens and saying, I don't want this to happen, so this should not happen. You have to think about how United actually get back to the top here. And I have always maintained Man United, this is a bona fide fact. Manchester United are terrible, terrible sellers. And in order to be good again, they need to become good sellers. And usually clubs like Manchester City sell their academy products for lots of money, 30, 40 million quid. And that is, you don't notice it. And that makes the difference for them, among everything else. But that makes the difference for them. But also, United aren't in that position really yet. They have a couple of options in that case, and they would be unpopular sales as well. But also, if you sell your best player and it's pure profit and it's book value that you can go and reinvest, that would throw essentially all of those questions away over the next few years in terms of PSR concerns and all this. It would make that much of a difference that I do think it's worth considering. A, if Bruno Fernandes wants to go, or if he wants to consider this, and B, how much the money is. It's not as simple for me as just saying no. Please get in the comments below. Follow me on social media at @double_Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And I'll see you soon in the next one for another Promise and podcast. Please subscribe and see you soon.